The unforgivable that cannot be touched knows the joy of being touched. It has no contours and therefore caresses all contours flowing into the crevices of matter, and is called only breath, a name that no one can name it. Earth, water, fire, wind, and the unspoken fifth element. It cannot stand alone but is a parasite in the gaps and boundaries, shaking the other four pillars. The hand that weaves the invisible kingdom is not a finger or a feather, but the very existence that weaves existence. A technique that envelops the untouchable. Invisibility melts and invades the visible, just as the gaze touches the skin and silence stains the bones. What remains at the end of breathing is a transparent vessel that has been sucked in and exhaled out, and only the remnants of which sway. Without form, it dwells in form. Without time, it fills time. Without a voice, it conceives a voice. A nameless spirit that fills the void. A crown of transparency spills from the crevice of a palm. The colourless embryo that sustains matter is embedded in everyone's chest, even today. Breath embraces, and embrace returns to breath. Invisible hands tremble at the throat. Invisible palms insert fingers into the nameless cocoon of breath, and in a single blink of an eye, the fifth element is exposed to the fecundity of the fifth element. Every limb is an organ derangement. The fifth thing that binds them together is the suspended matter of in-between that spills out from the contours of existence. Whenever the exhalation calms, the transparent embrace leaves traces in the depths of the vocal cords, suspended not as an echo but as a pre-existent groan. Its lack of outline is the core of invisibility. The unnameable wind corrodes the scaffolding of this world without being able to name it, and inverts everything it touches into the untouchable. Occupying the fifth element, it is not so much an occupation as a fine thorn in the side of every concept of control, silently puncturing the membrane of order. What is seen is only a shadow of what is unseen, he muttered, and the breath was faintly unravelled from the tip of his tongue and blended into the folds of space. The embrace of the invisible is always behind us, guarding a position that cannot be named, and with fingers thinner than the wind, it is holding the rope between existence and non-existence. Conquered by the breath of the invisible, the embrace of the invisible, we are always held in the bosom of the unnameable, losing the tongue with which to name it. We are always held in the bosom of the unnameable, losing the tongue to name it, while turning it inside out and untying the umbilical cord of the invisible element. The earth sinks under the deception of floating in the sky. The top that our souls select is in turn a deeply sunken inside, a composition of pilgrimage that reaches nowhere. The space between concepts and organs, the grains of voice lying in the back of the throat before they become words. The invisibility embraced by the breath is not a fragment of light that can be caught by the naked eye, but rather a surplus that precedes existence, faintly transcending the cage of contours and dwelling on the outer edge of language. The invisible continues to dance unseen as the axis that controls the visible. It makes the boundary between the embracer and the embraced disappear. The exhalation that fills the lungs, the traces that are burned into the body's temperature. Countless fingerprint fragments resonate between breaths. If there is an invisible pillar in this world, it is the area occupied by breath, where the contourless inhabitants crowd together. Not the wind, not the voice, but the palm of something invisible that tries to touch something invisible, still writes invisible words along our spine. And what occupies the space between I and you is an unnameable existence that continues to be born. The breath of the untouchable, which is too coarse to be called air, seeps into a place deeper than the skin. Wisdom, once submerged at the edge of the world, has been shorn of its limbs and returned to the pure between. The fifth and first tremor, which is neither fire, water, earth, nor wind. The invisible nests within the present, and the invisible blossoms within the invisible. It is like the silence that germinates in the shadow of words. It slips inside the lungs and sows a blank in the field of thought. The fifth element is a kingdom without hegemony, an empire of pure blank space. The moment the world stops staring at the territory that no one can occupy, the fifth voice is heard. Invisibility is a reverberation alienated from the outer contours of vision, a pre-perceptual language spat out into the cracks, a spiral amplitude of less than a fingertip, submerged in an untouchable void. There is a fading that announces 5 at the place beyond the 4 quadrants,